I never thought a piece of farm equipment would make me the most hated man in Riverside Meadows. But here we are. My name is Tyler Young, and I'm a simple guy who bought a house in what I thought was a quiet suburban development outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The property sat at the intersection of 3 streets, which meant I had plenty of frontage and a corner lot that gave me space for my truck and equipment. I work in construction, and during winter months, I plow driveways and parking lots to supplement my income. It's honest work, and the money helped me afford this place. When I moved in 2 years ago, the neighbors seemed friendly enough. The development had about 40 homes, all built in the last decade, with a small clubhouse at the center where the HOA held their meetings. I attended exactly one of those meetings before I realized it wasn't for me. A bunch of people arguing about whether Christmas lights could stay up past January 5th and whether someone's mailbox was the wrong shade of black. I had better things to do with my Thursday evenings. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in late November. I was in my driveway, attaching my plow blade to my Ford F-350 for the upcoming season. The weatherman predicted our first real snowfall of the year, and I wanted to be ready. I had a dozen clients lined up, and being prepared meant the difference between making good money and scrambling at 4 in the morning. I heard the clicking of heels on pavement before I saw her. Patricia Morrison, the HOA president, was marching across the street from her immaculate colonial with a clipboard clutched to her chest. She was in her late 40s, with the kind of haircut that required speaking to multiple managers and a perpetual expression like she smelled something rotten. "Excuse me, Tyler," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I need to speak with you about that." She pointed at my plow blade like it was a dead animal. "Morning, Patricia," I said, wiping grease off my hands. "What about it?" "That is commercial equipment," she said, stopping at the edge of my driveway. "According to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our HOA covenants, commercial vehicles and equipment cannot be stored in visible locations on residential properties." I straightened up, looking at my truck. "It's a plow blade. I use it for work." "Exactly. Commercial equipment." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "It needs to be removed from your property or stored out of sight." "Out of sight? It's attached to my truck. I'm getting ready for the season." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you'll need to park your truck in your garage." I laughed, which was apparently the wrong response based on how her face reddened. "My garage is full of tools and equipment. The truck doesn't fit with everything in there." "That's not the HOA's problem. The covenant is clear. Commercial equipment must not be visible from the street. I'm giving you 48 hours to comply or you'll face fines." "Fines? For a plow blade? Patricia, come on. Half the guys in this neighborhood have trailers and work trucks." "Those are being addressed as well. But your equipment is particularly egregious because it's visible from 3 streets given your corner location. The board has already discussed this, and we're in agreement. 48 hours, Tyler." She turned and walked away before I could respond, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm back to her house. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what just happened. Then I called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 2 houses down and seemed like a reasonable guy. "Yeah, she came by last week," Marcus said when I asked if he'd heard anything about this. "Told me my boat trailer was against the rules. I built a side shed just to avoid the hassle. Trust me, fighting Patricia isn't worth it. She lives for this stuff. But it's a plow blade. I need it for work." "I hear you, man, but she'll make your life miserable. The fines start at $50 a day and increase weekly. She got the Hendersons for some garden gnomes last year, and it cost them over $1,000 before they gave in." After hanging up, I pulled out the covenant documents I'd received when I bought the house. Sure enough, Buried in Section 7 was the language about commercial vehicles and equipment, but there were exceptions for vehicles used in the normal course of residential life. I figured a plow blade fell into that category, especially since I'd been using it to help the neighborhood. That was the thing Patricia conveniently ignored. For the past 2 winters, I'd been plowing the main road through our development for free. The road led from the entrance all the way to the clubhouse, about half a mile of winding asphalt that the city didn't maintain since it was private property. The HOA was supposed to contract with a service, but they'd been having budget issues. When I moved in and saw people struggling after the first big snow, I just started doing it. Took me an extra 30 minutes before I headed out to my paying jobs, and it made everyone's life easier. I'd gotten thank you notes, cookies, even a fruit basket. People stopped me in the grocery store to express their appreciation. And now Patricia wanted to fine me for the same equipment that made all that possible. The first snow came that Friday, right on schedule. 6 inches fell overnight, turning the development into a winter postcard. My phone started ringing at 5 in the morning with clients needing their properties cleared. I got dressed, grabbed my coffee, and headed out to my truck. The plow blade was still attached. My 48 hours weren't up until that afternoon, and I had work to do. But as I warmed up the truck, I made a decision. If Patricia wanted to be technical about the rules, I could be technical too. I backed out of my driveway and turned left, heading toward the development entrance. Normally, I'd have made a pass through the neighborhood first, clearing the main road so people could get out. Not today. I drove straight past, leaving the neighborhood road buried under 6 inches of powder. My phone rang as I was finishing my first job. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Tyler, this is Patricia Morrison. I need you to come back and plow the neighborhood road. Several residents are unable to leave their homes." I put her on speaker as I repositioned my truck. "Sorry, Patricia, I'm working. You always plow our road before you go to work." That was when I could store my equipment properly. Since that's apparently against the rules, I figured I should focus on my commercial jobs. You know, the ones that require commercial equipment. Silence stretched across the line. Then, in a voice dripping with false sweetness, she said, "We can discuss the equipment situation." "Nothing to discuss. You gave me 48 hours to remove it. I'm planning to comply. But that means I won't be able to help out the neighborhood anymore. You understand?" "Tyler, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You're the president of the HOA. I'm sure you can contract with a professional service to handle the snow removal. That's what the dues are supposed to cover, right?" I ended the call and got back to work. By noon, my phone had 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages. Patricia, other board members, neighbors asking if I was okay and when I'd clear the road. I responded to the neighbors with a simple message explaining that the HOA had rules about my plow blade, so I couldn't help anymore. The responses were immediately divided. Some people understood. Others were angry, either at me or at Patricia. A few suggested I just park the truck in my garage and stop being difficult. That last group didn't understand. This wasn't about the garage. This was about principle. I'd been helping these people out of the goodness of my heart, and the HOA decided to slap me with violations and threats of fines. They couldn't have it both ways. When I got home that evening, there was a note on my door. An official HOA violation notice, printed on fancy letterhead, informing me that my plow blade was still visible, and I was now subject to $50 per day in fines starting immediately. It was signed by Patricia and 2 other board members, Linda Cartwright and Robert Sheffield. I took a photo of it and posted it to our neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption, "For everyone asking why I didn't plow today." The comments section exploded. Deborah Chen wrote, "This is ridiculous. Tyler has been helping us for free for 2 years." Mark Patterson commented, "The rules are the rules. If he wants to live here, he needs to follow them." Someone named Jennifer Santos posted, "Maybe if the HOA actually used our dues properly, we'd have a real snow removal service instead of relying on Tyler's charity." Patricia herself chimed in, "The board is committed to maintaining property values and aesthetic standards. All residents agreed to the covenants when they purchased their homes. No one is above the rules." I didn't respond to any of it. I made myself dinner, watched some television, and went to bed. Let them figure it out. The next morning was Saturday, and another 3 inches had fallen overnight. The neighborhood road now had 9 inches of snow, with drifts pushing it closer to a foot in some places. I pulled out of my driveway, plow blade attached, and headed to my Saturday jobs. As I drove past the development entrance, I saw 2 cars stuck at the end of the road, their wheels spinning uselessly in the deep snow. My phone rang. Marcus this time. "Hey man, any chance you can make a quick pass through? My wife needs to get to work and she can't get out." "Sorry, Marcus. HOA doesn't want me using my commercial equipment in the neighborhood." "Come on, Tyler. I get you're mad at Patricia, but you're punishing everyone." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm following the rules. Patricia made it very clear that my equipment is against the covenants. I'm just being compliant. This is petty. Maybe, but it's also fair. Tell your wife she should talk to the HOA about hiring a professional service." I felt a little guilty as I hung up, but not enough to turn around. Marcus was a good guy, and his wife didn't deserve to be stuck. But neither did I deserve to be fined for helping people. By Sunday, the neighborhood was in full crisis mode. The Facebook group had over 300 comments across multiple threads. People were arguing, taking sides, sharing screenshots of the covenants, and generally losing their minds over snow removal. A group of residents organized an emergency HOA meeting for Monday evening. The notice went out Sunday afternoon, posted in the Facebook group and emailed to all residents. The agenda had one item: snow removal and enforcement of covenant violations. I wasn't planning to attend, but Marcus stopped by Sunday night to convince me. "Look, I know you're right to be upset," he said, standing on my porch with his hands shoved in his coat pockets. "But this has gotten out of control. Half the neighborhood can't get out of their driveways. The city won't plow our private road, and the HOA's budget doesn't have room for a professional service until they approve it at a meeting. That takes time. So what do you want me to do? Come to the meeting tomorrow, talk to the board, maybe you can work something out." "Like what?" "They've already fined me." "Maybe they'll waive the fines if you agree to plow. I don't know. But this standoff isn't helping anyone." I considered it. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let the whole thing burn down and prove my point. But Marcus was right about one thing. People were suffering, and most of them had nothing to do with Patricia's power trip. Fine. I'll be there. The clubhouse was packed Monday evening. Every seat was taken, with people standing along the walls and crowding the doorway. The room hummed with conversation as I walked in, and I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me. Some people nodded or smiled. Others looked away or glared. Patricia sat at the front table with Linda and Robert, the other 2 board members. She had a gavel, which seemed excessive for a small HOA meeting, but that was Patricia for you. She called the meeting to order at 7 o'clock sharp, banging the gavel 3 times. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "I know this has been a difficult few days for everyone. The board wants to address the snow removal situation and find a path forward. How about Tyler just plows like he's been doing?" Someone shouted from the back. Patricia's face tightened. That's what we're here to discuss. However, I want to remind everyone that the HOA has rules and regulations that exist for good reason. We cannot simply ignore them because they're inconvenient. More inconvenient than being trapped in our houses. Another voice called out, "Order, please." Patricia banged the gavel again. We'll have time for comments. First, I want to outline the situation. Tyler Young has been voluntarily plowing our roads for the past 2 winters. While the board appreciates this gesture, Mr. Young has been in violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our covenants by storing commercial equipment in a visible location. When we notified him of this violation and gave him 48 hours to comply, he chose instead to stop plowing our roads. "Because you fined him," someone yelled. "He was fined for non-compliance with a legitimate covenant violation," Patricia said. "The two issues are separate." How are they separate? I found myself standing, my voice cutting through the chatter. "You told me I couldn't have my plow blade visible. That plow blade is what I use to clear your roads. So yeah, I stopped plowing. That's called cause and effect, Patricia." The room erupted in applause and shouting. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. "Mr. Young, you're out of order." "No, you're out of order," someone shouted, and the whole thing felt like it was about to devolve into complete chaos. Robert Sheffield stood up, raising his hands. He was a quiet guy in his 60s, retired from something in finance. "Everyone, please, let's be civil about this. We're neighbors. We should be able to work together." The room gradually quieted down. Robert continued, "Tyler, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say we're grateful for what you've been doing. The board didn't mean to seem ungrateful when we sent that notice." "Could have fooled me," I said, "but the covenant is clear. We have rules about commercial vehicles and equipment. Those rules exist to maintain property values and the aesthetic quality of our neighborhood. My plow blade doesn't affect anyone's property values." "That's subjective," Patricia interjected. "Some residents have complained about the industrial appearance." "Which residents?" I asked. "Because I've gotten nothing but thank yous for 2 years until last week." Patricia didn't answer, which told me everything I needed to know. She was the one who had a problem. Maybe Linda and Robert too, but they dressed it up as multiple complaints to justify the violation notice. Linda spoke up for the first time. She was in her 50s with graying hair and glasses that perpetually slid down her nose. "The board has discussed a potential compromise. What if you parked your truck in the garage when you're not actively working?" I told Patricia, "My garage is full of tools and equipment. I'd have to empty it every time I wanted to park, then refill it every morning. That's not reasonable. Then perhaps you could park on the street when you're between jobs." "So I can't park in my own driveway, but I can park on the street. How does that make sense?" "Street parking is temporary and thus covered under a different section of the covenants." I laughed, and it wasn't a friendly sound. "This is insane. You're jumping through hoops to justify punishing me for helping you." Marcus stood up from where he was sitting in the middle of the room. "Why don't we just revise the covenant? Add an exception for vehicles used in neighborhood maintenance." "Covenant revisions require a vote of all homeowners," Patricia said, "and a 70% approval threshold. That process takes months." "So we're stuck," someone said. "Not stuck," Robert said. "We can contract with a professional snow removal service. I've been making calls this afternoon. There's a company out of Menomonee Falls that can start next week. The cost would be about $3,000 for the season." A collective groan went through the room. $3,000. A woman near the front asked. "Our budget is already tight. What gets cut to pay for that?" "We'd need to have a special assessment," Linda said. "Divide the cost among all homeowners. That's about $75 per household." More groaning and shouting. People were angry now and not at me. The crowd was turning on the board. This is ridiculous. Deborah Chen stood up, her voice cutting through the noise. Tyler has been doing this for free. For free. And now we're going to pay thousands of dollars because Patricia decided a plow blade is ugly. It's not about aesthetics alone, Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its authority. It's about maintaining standards. What standards? Tyler's house looks fine. His yard is neat. He's a good neighbor who's been helping all of us, and this is how you treat him. The room erupted in agreement. I felt a strange mix of vindication and discomfort. I didn't love being the center of this mess, but I wasn't going to back down either. Patricia banged her gavel. The board will take this feedback under advisement. For now, we need to address the immediate situation. The roads need to be cleared. Then clear them, someone shouted. Use the HOA's money to hire someone now. That requires board approval and a vote, Patricia said. So vote right now. Patricia looked at Linda and Robert. They had a whispered conversation, then Linda nodded. The board votes to approve emergency funds of $500 to hire immediate snow removal for the next significant snowfall. All in favor. 3 hands went up. Motion passes. I'll contact services tomorrow. And what about Tyler's fine? Marcus asked. Patricia hesitated. The fine stands. He's in violation of the covenant. But you're hiring a service now, so you don't need him to plow. Why not just drop it? Because the violation exists regardless of whether we need his assistance. The covenant is clear. I'd heard enough. I stood up and headed for the door. People called after me, but I kept walking. There was no point staying. Patricia had made her position clear, and the board wasn't going to override her. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a slap. I walked to my truck and sat in the cab, letting the engine warm up. Through the clubhouse windows, I could see the meeting continuing, people gesturing and arguing. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Sorry, man. We tried. I drove home and spent the rest of the night researching my options. The covenant was legally binding, and as much as I hated to admit it, Patricia was technically right. Commercial equipment was prohibited from being visible. My argument about using it for the neighborhood didn't matter from a legal standpoint, but I wasn't going to just accept the fine. I called a lawyer Tuesday morning, a guy named Jeff Larson who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. How much is the fine so far? He asked after I explained the situation. $50 a day since Friday. So $200, and it increases to $75 per day starting this Friday. And you have no way to park the truck out of sight. Not without completely rearranging my garage every single day, which isn't practical. Jeff was quiet for a moment. Here's the thing. The HOA probably has the right to fine you under the covenant, but there's an argument to be made about selective enforcement. If other people have commercial vehicles or equipment visible and they're not being fined, that could be discrimination. I don't know if others are being fined. Find out. Take photos. Document everything. Also, I want to look at your title documents and the exact wording of the covenant. Sometimes these things have loopholes or conflicting language we can exploit. Exploit how? For example, if the covenant defines commercial vehicles as those over a certain weight or used exclusively for business, we might argue your personal truck with an attachable plow doesn't qualify. Or if there's language about reasonable use exceptions, we could argue that using the equipment to benefit the community falls under that umbrella. How much is this going to cost me? Initial consultation and document review, $500. If we need to fight this officially, could be a few thousand depending on how far it goes. I thanked him and said I'd think about it. $500 wasn't nothing, but it might be worth it to stick it to Patricia. Wednesday brought another snowfall. 4 inches this time, enough to make the roads tricky but not impassable. I got up early, attached my plow, and headed out to my jobs. As I drove past the neighborhood entrance, I saw the roads were still covered. Whatever service Patricia had hired hadn't shown up yet. My phone started ringing around 8 in the morning. Neighbors asking when the roads would be cleared, complaining that the service hadn't arrived. I directed them all to Patricia. By noon, the neighborhood Facebook group was on fire again. People posting photos of the snowy roads, complaining about the lack of response, demanding to know where their HOA dues were going. Patricia posted, "The service we contracted experienced equipment issues. They will be here by end of day. We appreciate everyone's patience." The comments were brutal. Tyler never had equipment issues. Maybe we should pay Tyler the $500 instead. This is what we get for harassing people who actually help. I felt a grim satisfaction reading them, but it faded when Marcus called. "Tyler, I need a favor. My daughter's sick and I need to get her to urgent care. Can you just clear a path from my house to the entrance? I'll pay you." "Marcus, I can't. If Patricia sees me plowing, she'll lose her mind. My kid is running a fever of 103. Please." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. This was exactly what I'd wanted to avoid, getting caught in the middle between my principles and people's actual needs. "Give me 10 minutes. I drove to Marcus's house and cleared a path from his driveway to the development entrance. It took 12 minutes and I refused his offer of payment. As I was finishing, a car pulled up. Patricia's Mercedes. She rolled down her window. "What are you doing?" "Helping a neighbor with a sick kid. You got a problem with that?" "You're in violation of the covenant by using that equipment in the neighborhood. Sue me, Patricia. Add it to my tab." I drove off before she could respond. My phone rang immediately, but I didn't answer. The professional service finally showed up Wednesday evening and did a mediocre job. They cleared the main road but missed several side areas and left uneven patches that refroze overnight into ice slicks. Thursday morning, I watched from my window as neighbors struggled to navigate the poorly cleared roads. Linda Cartwright knocked on my door Thursday afternoon. Unlike Patricia, she seemed genuinely uncomfortable. "Tyler, can we talk?" I let her in, offering coffee which she declined. "Look," she said, sitting on my couch. "I know this situation has gotten out of hand. The board never intended to cause this much trouble. We were just trying to enforce the rules fairly. By targeting me specifically, not targeting. But your property is visible from 3 streets and we've had complaints." "From who?" Patricia, Linda shifted uncomfortably. "There were other complaints. Names, I can't share that." "Because they don't exist. Patricia has a problem with me and she's using the HOA to push me around, and you and Robert are going along with it. That's not fair. We're trying to maintain standards for everyone's benefit. You want to maintain standards, fine. But don't expect me to volunteer my time and equipment when you're fining me for using them. You can't have it both ways, Linda." She left without accomplishing whatever she'd hoped to accomplish. I felt a little bad about being harsh with her, but not bad enough to change my position. Friday brought the big one. A winter storm rolled through Wisconsin, dumping 14 inches of snow on Milwaukee and the surrounding suburbs. My phone rang off the hook starting at 5 in the morning. Clients needed parking lots cleared, driveways made passable, walkways scraped. I worked for 16 hours straight, making good money but exhausted by the time I got home. The neighborhood was buried. 14 inches on top of the poorly cleared previous snow meant some areas had close to 2 feet of accumulation. The development entrance was impassable. Cars sat abandoned at various points along the road where people had tried and failed to get out. My phone had 43 missed calls and countless text messages. Several from Patricia demanding I call her back immediately. Others from neighbors begging for help. A few from news organizations asking if I'd comment on a viral Facebook post about HOA tyranny. Apparently, someone had posted the whole saga to a popular forum, and it had blown up. Thousands of comments, shares, and reactions. Local news stations were picking it up as a human interest story. I ignored all of it and went to bed. Saturday morning, there was a camera crew in front of my house. A young woman with a microphone approached as I stepped outside to get my newspaper. Tyler Young, I'm Monica Chen from Channel 6 News. We'd love to talk to you about your dispute with the HOA. No comment, I said, turning to go back inside. Just a few questions. Our viewers are very interested in your story. I said no comment. I shut the door, watching through the window as they filmed my house and my truck with the plow blade clearly visible. Great. This was exactly what I needed. My lawyer called an hour later. Tyler, it's Jeff. Have you seen the news? There's a crew outside my house. This could actually work in our favor. Public pressure might force the HOA to back down, but we need to be smart about this. Don't talk to the media without running it by me first. I'm not talking to them at all. Good. Let me handle any official statements. In the meantime, I've been reviewing your documents. There's something interesting in Section 19 of the Covenant. It talks about community benefit exceptions for certain activities. It's vague enough that I think we can argue your plowing falls under that umbrella. Will it hold up in court? Maybe. But I'm hoping we don't get that far. Sometimes the threat of litigation is enough to make an HOA reasonable. The news ran a segment Saturday evening. I watched it with a mix of fascination and horror. They interviewed Patricia, who came across as exactly the type of petty tyrant she was. They interviewed neighbors, most of whom supported me. They showed footage of the buried roads and my truck with the offensive plow blade. The anchor concluded with, "A dispute over property rules has left an entire neighborhood paralyzed by snow." Coming up, we'll talk to an HOA expert about whether Riverside Meadows board overstepped their authority. My phone started ringing immediately. Friends I hadn't heard from in years calling to say they'd seen me on TV. My mother calling from Florida demanding to know what was going on. Reporters asking for interviews. I turned my phone off and made dinner. Sunday morning, there was a knock at my door. Robert Sheffield stood on my porch looking tired. "Tyler, can we talk?" Off the record, neighbor to neighbor. I let him in. Robert had always seemed like a decent guy, just someone who got dragged into Patricia's schemes. "The board met last night," he said. "Emergency session. This media attention is making us look terrible. You are terrible, or at least Patricia is," Robert sighed. "Patricia is very passionate about maintaining standards. Sometimes she takes it too far, but Linda and I share the blame. We should have pushed back harder." "So what happens now?" "We want to offer a compromise. The board will waive all fines and make an exception to Section 7, allowing your plow blade to remain visible from December through March. In exchange, we'd like you to resume clearing the main road." "You'd like me to, but you're not offering to pay me." "The HOA budget doesn't have room for professional services. You saw what that would cost. So you want me to do it for free while you threatened to fine me into bankruptcy last week. We made a mistake. We're admitting that." I leaned back in my chair, considering. Part of me wanted to tell Robert to get lost, to make them suffer until they crawled back on their knees. But the practical part of me knew this was probably the best offer I'd get. "Not good enough," I said. "Here's my counter-offer. The board waives all fines and makes a permanent exception to Section 7 for vehicles and equipment used in neighborhood maintenance or community benefit. Not just December through March. Permanent." and you put it in writing that I'm under no obligation to plow, but if I choose to do so, it's covered under the exception. We can't make permanent changes without a full homeowner vote. Then I guess we're at an impasse. Because I'm not agreeing to anything temporary that Patricia can use against me next year when everyone forgets about this. Robert rubbed his face. Let me talk to the others. He left, and I spent the rest of Sunday wondering if I'd just blown my chance at a resolution. But I meant what I said. I wasn't giving Patricia another opportunity to come after me. Monday morning brought another knock. This time it was Jeff Larson, my lawyer. I got a call from the HOA's attorney, he said, looking pleased. They want to settle. Settle what? They haven't sued me. No, but we sent them a letter Friday outlining potential legal action for selective enforcement, harassment, and emotional distress. The attorney called this morning wanting to negotiate. What are they offering? Full waiver of fines, permanent covenant exception for your equipment when used for community purposes, and they'll pay our legal fees. In exchange, you sign a mutual release saying neither party will pursue further legal action. What about the plowing? Do they expect me to do it? No requirement. That's up to you. I thought about it. This was actually a better deal than what Robert had offered. The permanent exception protected me, and not being required to plow meant I had leverage if Patricia tried anything else in the future. What about the increased fines? I've been accumulating $75 a day since last Friday. All waived. Clean slate. Tell them we have a deal, but I want the document in writing, signed by all board members and filed with the county. Already requested. They're drawing up the papers now. The formal agreement was ready by Wednesday. Jeff reviewed it, confirmed it said everything we'd negotiated, and I signed. The HOA board signed the next day. Copies were filed with the County Register of Deeds, making it part of the official property records. Patricia never spoke to me directly. All communication went through attorneys and Robert. I figured she was embarrassed, both by the media attention and by having to back down. Good. The question everyone wanted to know was whether I'd start plowing again. The neighborhood roads were still a mess, with the professional service having given up after the massive storm. People had been parking at the development entrance and walking to their houses because the roads were impassable. Thursday evening, I made my decision. I attached my plow blade, started my truck, and made a pass through the neighborhood. It took 2 hours to clear all the roads properly, but when I finished, every street was accessible. I didn't do it for Patricia or the board. I did it because I'm not a vindictive person, and because most of my neighbors were good people who didn't deserve to be trapped by snow. The response was overwhelming. I got thank you notes, gift cards, homemade cookies, and genuine expressions of gratitude. People stopped me in the grocery store to shake my hand. Kids waved as I drove past their houses. Patricia never thanked me. Neither did Linda. Robert sent a brief text. Appreciate what you did. The rest of the winter passed without incident. I plowed when it snowed, kept my plow blade attached throughout the season, and enjoyed the fact that Patricia couldn't do anything about it. The media attention eventually died down, though the story apparently became a favorite on HOA horror story forums online. In March, the annual HOA meeting happened. These meetings elected board members, approved budgets, and discussed neighborhood business. I attended this one. The clubhouse was packed again, but the atmosphere was different than that contentious emergency meeting in December. People seemed more engaged, asking detailed questions about finances and decisions. When it came time to elect board members, Patricia announced she was running for another term as president. So did Robert and Linda for their positions. Then Marcus stood up. I'd like to nominate Tyler Young for the board. I nearly choked on my water. What? You've shown you actually care about this neighborhood. We need people like that making decisions. I nominate Tyler Young." Several people seconded it. Before I could object, my name was on the ballot. I didn't campaign. I figured there was no way people would elect me after everything that happened. But when the votes were counted, I'd won a board position. Patricia won re-election as president with a much narrower margin than previous years. Linda kept her seat. Robert had decided not to run again, tired of the drama. So there I was, on the HOA board with Patricia. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The first board meeting I attended as a member was awkward. Patricia ran through the agenda with tight efficiency, barely acknowledging me. Linda tried to be friendly but seemed uncomfortable. The fourth board member was Deborah Chen, who'd also been elected in a bit of an upset. We covered routine business, budget reviews, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance for the summer. Then Patricia got to new business. "We need to review our covenant enforcement procedures," she said. "Recent events have shown that our current approach may not be effective." "You mean when you tried to find Tyler and it blew up in your face?" Deborah asked. Patricia's jaw tightened. "I mean we need clear guidelines for how violations are identified, communicated, and resolved. How about we start by not targeting people who help the neighborhood?" I suggested. No one was targeted. The covenant was enforced as written. Selectively enforced. Jeff found at least 6 other properties with potential violations that were never addressed. "If you have specific examples, we can review them. Or we could revise the covenants to be more reasonable. Allow for community benefit exceptions, reduce fines, and create an appeals process. You know, treat residents like partners instead of criminals." Deborah nodded. "I like that approach. Let's form a committee to review the covenants and propose revisions." Patricia looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, but she was outvoted. We formed the committee, with me and Deborah leading it along with several interested residents. Over the next few months, we did exactly what I suggested. We reviewed every covenant, identified outdated or overly restrictive rules, and proposed reasonable alternatives. The community benefit exception was expanded and clarified. Fines were reduced and capped. An appeals process was created. In June, we held a special meeting to vote on the proposed revisions. We needed 70% approval from all homeowners. The meeting was well attended, and after 2 hours of discussion, the vote was called. 78% in favor. The revisions passed. Patricia voted against them, along with about 10 other residents who believed in strict rule enforcement. But they were overwhelmingly outnumbered. The new covenants were filed with the county in July. Riverside Meadows had officially become a more reasonable place to live. Patricia served out her term as president, but didn't run for re-election the following year. I heard she was considering moving to a different development, one with stricter rules and higher standards. I hoped she'd find happiness there, though I had my doubts. I got re-elected to the board and eventually became vice president. Deborah became president, and we worked well together. The neighborhood thrived under less oppressive leadership. Property values actually increased, proving that reasonable rules and community cooperation were better for everyone than Patricia's iron-fisted approach. I still plow the roads every winter. It's become an expected part of living in Riverside Meadows. Some winters I'm busy with commercial work and only manage the main roads. Other winters I have time to clear every cul-de-sac and driveway. The community is grateful either way. Last December, on the anniversary of the whole saga, someone posted the news segment to Facebook again. The comments were full of people laughing about how ridiculous the situation had been and praising how it turned out. Marcus commented, "Best thing that ever happened to this neighborhood." We got rid of a tyrant and gained a leader, I replied. I just wanted to park my truck in my driveway, but truthfully, it became about more than that. It became about standing up to petty tyranny, about community cooperation being stronger than rigid rules, and about how sometimes refusing to back down is exactly what people need you to do. My plow blade still sits attached to my truck every winter, visible from 3 streets at my corner lot. And every time I drive past Patricia's old house, now occupied by a young family with 3 kids, I smile knowing that sometimes the good guys really do win. The thing about HOA disputes is they're often about power more than rules. Patricia wanted control, and she used the covenants as a weapon. When that power was challenged, the whole structure crumbled because it wasn't built on logic or fairness. It was built on intimidation. The new board operates differently. We enforce rules when necessary, but we also use common sense. When someone wants to put up a fence that's 6 inches taller than the covenant allows, we don't immediately fine them. We discuss why the rule exists, whether the fence actually causes a problem, and find a solution that works for everyone. Last month, a new resident wanted to park his work trailer in his driveway. Under the old enforcement, Patricia would have sent a violation notice immediately. Under our approach, we talked to him, explained the concerns about commercial equipment, and helped him find a solution. He built a small storage shed on the side of his property where the trailer fits perfectly and isn't visible from the street. Problem solved. No fines, no lawyers, no news crews. That's how it should work. That's how it does work now. I learned a lot from that winter with Patricia. I learned that sometimes helping people isn't appreciated until it's taken away. I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, can change an entire community for the better. And I learned that a plow blade attached to a truck can become a symbol of resistance against unreasonable authority. People still ask me if I regret how everything went down, if I wish I just parked the truck in my garage and avoided the whole mess. The answer is no, not for a second. Because that mess woke up a neighborhood. It showed people they had power, that they could challenge the board, that the rules existed to serve them rather than control them. 40 families became more engaged with their community, more willing to speak up, more invested in making Riverside Meadows a good place to live. And all because Patricia Morrison couldn't stand the sight of a plow blade in my driveway. The final twist came last spring. Patricia's house sold and the new owners moved in. Nice family, like I mentioned. The husband, Tom, works in construction like me. His truck is bigger than mine. He came over to introduce himself a few days after moving in, and we talked about the neighborhood, the HOA, and eventually the infamous plow blade saga. "So that was your truck on the news?" he asked, grinning. My wife and I watched that story. We were laughing about it for weeks. Small world. Listen, I do concrete work. Sometimes I bring home equipment. I saw the covenant says there's an exception for community benefit stuff. Think that covers me. As long as you're not running a full commercial operation from your house, you're fine. And if anyone gives you trouble, come talk to me. He nodded, relieved. Good to know. By the way, my wife was wondering if you still plow the roads in winter. We've got 2 little kids, and reliable snow removal was actually something we looked for when buying. I do. Not every single time it snows, but the big storms, definitely. Perfect. We'll make sure to keep some cookies coming your way. That conversation made me realize something. The reputation of Riverside Meadows had actually improved because of what happened. People saw it as a neighborhood that stood up to HOA tyranny, that valued community helpers, that had reasonable leadership. The saga that Patricia thought would destroy property values had actually enhanced them, Karma has a funny way of working out. I'm sitting in my driveway now, writing this on a cool October evening. The leaves are changing colors, and there's a hint of cold in the air that promises winter isn't far off. My plow blade is in the garage, waiting to be attached when the first snow comes. The neighborhood is quiet. Kids are playing basketball in the street 2 houses down. Someone's grilling dinner, and the smell of burgers drifts across the yards. Marcus is washing his car while his wife gardens in their front yard. It's peaceful, normal, exactly what a neighborhood should be. Patricia's gone, living somewhere else with stricter rules and higher fences. Linda moved last year to be closer to her grandchildren in Minnesota. The board now consists of me, Deborah, and 3 other reasonable people who understand that communities thrive on cooperation rather than control. The covenants still exist. We still enforce them when necessary. But we do it with wisdom and discretion, understanding that rules serve people, not the other way around. And my plow blade. It's still visible every winter, a reminder that sometimes standing your ground changes everything. When the first snow falls this year, I'll be ready. I'll attach that blade, fire up the truck, and clear the roads like I've done for years now. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because that's what neighbors do for each other. Patricia tried to find me into submission. Instead, she accidentally created something better. A neighborhood where people matter more than regulations, where helping each other is valued over arbitrary aesthetic standards, where residents have a voice in how their community is run. The plow blade demanded I remove became the plow blade that freed an entire neighborhood from tyrannical leadership. And every time I use it, every time I clear those roads and make life easier for 40 families, I think about how one woman's need for control backfired spectacularly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, helping others, and watching petty tyrants fade into irrelevance while communities grow stronger without them. The story could have ended differently. I could have backed down, removed the plow blade, let Patricia win. The neighborhood would have limped along under her leadership, paying too much for services I provided for free, living under oppressive rules that stifled any sense of community spirit. But I didn't back down, and because of that, everything changed. So here's to plow blades and property disputes, to standing up for yourself even when it's difficult, and to the understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance can transform entire communities. Winter is coming. The roads will need clearing. And I'll be ready, plow blade attached, doing what I've always done, helping my neighbors, on my terms.